This episode is brought to you by Columbia Southern University. Now, Columbia Southern University is an all-online university based in Orange Beach, Alabama. Now, what does that mean for you? That means because they are an all-online university, they are much more flexible and easy to fit into your schedule. Whether you've got family obligations, work obligations, other personal obligations, you're able to structure the classes to take them when it fits into your personal schedule. Now, they offer degree programs ranging from associates to bachelor's to master's, and they even offer doctorate programs. Now, most of you watching this are going to be interested in things like their EMS, their fire science, other public safety type degrees, but they also offer things like business, cybersecurity, information technology, and more. Right now, they are offering 50% off tuition for new enrollment. And if you're interested, I will leave the link in the description below. Visit columbiasouthern.edu/FFN. Amy, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. So tell me about Women in Fire. I just recently discovered what Women in Fire was maybe about a month ago, and I reached out to you to have you on. I'm very interested to hear, and I know that there's a lot of young women looking to get into the fire service that'll be interested to know more about what it is, who you are, how you got involved, and how it could help them. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all. And it's interesting. We hear that so frequently, unfortunately, that that people throughout the fire service haven't heard of Women in Fire. So any chance we get to kind of spread the word, it's definitely appreciated.
Yeah.
So Women in Fire was actually founded in the early 1980s by some females that were in the fire service that saw the need to have an advocacy group. And it's kind of morphed and evolved and changed throughout the years, of course. And really, it's an advocacy group that promotes inclusion within the fire service. So we have a ton of different kind of areas that we focus on: mentoring. We have some conferences. We have one coming up pretty quick. We work with different research groups to try to bring better data to the table for women that are working in the fire service. And really, there's a wide variety of things we do. We'll work with departments on policies, and you name it, we kind of dabble in it if it means making the fire service a little bit better for everyone that's involved.
Yeah. And how did you get involved with them, and what do you do there?
Yeah, so I'm currently the president.
Okay.
And here, gosh, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I went to the National Fire Academy and took a class, and also had never heard of Women in Fire before. Have been in the fire service now about 20 years, I guess. At that time, hadn't heard of it though. And there was one other female in my class, Angie Hughes, who is our past president, just before myself. And we just connected and clicked throughout the class. The National Fire Academy class itself, they do a good job there of kind of making everybody either come together or connect on some level. So we hit it off there. I got involved with the organization, and within a few months, they had a board member opening within my region, and I've been involved ever since.
Okay. So if I'm a 18-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old girl looking to get into the fire service, and I come to Women in Fire, what should I expect? How could I get involved? What would Women in Fire do to help me get into the fire service? And then that same sort of question for maybe I'm a female that's been in the fire service for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. If I come to you, then what?
Yeah. I mean, I think both would really benefit from our mentoring opportunities. So if you become a member with Women in Fire, we have a mentoring program where essentially you go and you look at the profiles of the different mentors that we have, and you pick someone out that maybe lines up either region-wise or rank-wise, or you just feel like you would connect with that person. And they can kind of help to give you advice about what does it look like to get into the fire service, or what does it look like to promote my career. We also have been involved kind of more so prior to my time and early in my time with helping different fire camps get established, or, I don't know if you're familiar with like a women's youth fire camp.
I'm
Okay.
not at all. Yeah.
So some areas like here, Portland Fire, I'm in Oregon, Portland Fire and Tualatin Valley have a women's fire camp, and many more departments throughout the region are involved with it. But essentially, they put on a few days worth of training sessions where young women that are either in middle school or high school are able to get involved, come out and see what it's like to get hands on, and maybe even kind of boost your confidence a bit in that you could do the skill. And it really is about technique and working together as a team to get the task done. So um, I think if you're early on and just wanting to get involved, either doing something along those lines or doing ride alongs with the fire department, make sure it's something you want to do before
Yeah.
you jump into it full on. But then also kind of setting that path for the long term of what does it look like to go to school, and kind of setting out the education plan.
Now, what's the feedback from the girls that do? I've never heard of these camps before. For the girls that do get involved and do these camps, do they not only find it good because they get to learn the skills and say, "Oh, actually I can do some of these things," or "This is actually what it's like," and as opposed to, and I've talked about this countless times on this channel, that TV and movies don't do us any favors in
No,
showing the reality of what
they
it's
don't.
actually like. Um, do they find it helpful not just for that, but does it kind of, how do I say this? They get to know people in the fire service, and it's like anything else. A lot of it is, if you know people, you
Mm-hmm.
get to build a reputation. Does it help them that way too?
It does. It's interesting. You brought up so many things I kind of want to touch on there.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it really is interesting in that we do have such low numbers of women in the fire service, and it can come down to, like, did you know someone? How were you inspired to get in? A friend of a friend typically is kind of how the fire service has been staffed over time.
hmm
Certainly not completely, and especially not more recently, but
yeah,
it can set a tone in certain regions. So yes, it is very helpful in that you get out, you get hands on, it's in a comfortable space. I know early in my career, I wasn't always comfortable on the dirt ground with, maybe counterparts that looked different than I did or did things a little bit different than I did. And if I got out and failed, it could feel awkward. And so I
yeah,
think it's helpful to have those training spaces where they can get hands on, feel comfortable, have other people that maybe look a little more like them or have the same body type, and can show them that it is possible to do the task, and that this is a career you could consider. And then also keep those relationships and those connections.
yeah,
Those who are involved in fire camps feel that it is a very good recruitment tool, maybe not necessarily for the department or area putting it on fully, but in general for the fire service. So there's pretty good percentages of the young ladies that get to go to these camps who then get into public service in some form or fashion.
You said something that's really interesting, and one of the main questions I want to ask you: why do you think, as somebody that has obviously been in the fire service for a while, and somebody that helps women not only get into the fire service but kind of build a network within, why are there, well, it's no secret that this is a male dominated career, and I'm not saying that's good, and I'm not saying
Yeah,
that's bad, I'm just saying it is.
right.
Why are so many women either afraid, or why are the numbers of women in the fire service so low?
It's kind of interesting, and it's especially recently there are maybe different theories to it than there would have been, say, 20 years ago. I think certainly the fact that I mentioned of not necessarily considering it as a career because, so if I look online and I'm looking at fire departments and I want to work for one, and it takes me a long time to maybe scroll through their marketing and find other women. And then I look at another department and they've got a good handful throughout the pictures of their marketing. I might be more likely to go to the one that's painted the picture that I belong a bit better. So I don't know, years ago that the fire service did a great job of painting the picture of belonging.
Yeah.
Um, but also there are other careers now that you can get into, and higher education is maybe more readily available and encouraged. So I think it's a mix of things of other opportunities might look greater, and shoot, if I can go work in another job where I know I'm not going to have some of the battles that I might have depending on the department I work for. Is that more enticing than trying to fight potentially an uphill battle? And that's not always the case. There are a lot of departments that are very inclusive and progressive and do an amazing job. Sometimes you don't know until you get into it.
Sure. So you said that something that's interesting too about just marketing, and it seems like, especially over the last 5, maybe 10 years, fire departments, all public safety, especially police are obviously dealing with a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
fire departments don't right now. They're doing a much better job at marketing themselves and making themselves seem more available. I don't know how
Right.
else to say. That's kind of a weird way to say that. I don't really know how else to say that. How else have you seen, because you've been a firefighter for how long now?
I've been in about 20 years.
So 20 years is, it's almost a full career. In the
Right.
course of the last 20 years, how have you seen it change for the better and for the worse?
Yeah. Gosh, tremendously. I think honestly, and I feel like some of my other colleagues throughout the country would say this as well. I think it's changed for the better. I do think that we've got a generation of firefighters coming in who approach the fire service a little bit differently, um, tend to be a little more open minded, I guess, is what I'd say, but also intrigued to kind of learn more about, what it is they're doing and why they're doing it, and kind of some of the day to day stuff that maybe before we would have been discouraged from kind of asking so many questions.
Sure.
So I think that we've got a different generation coming in. I think that helps. I think also, you mentioned social media obviously is completely different and available, whereas 20 years ago that really wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that departments are able to use some of that to their benefit. Recruitment tools have become vastly different than they were. And on the flip side, unfortunately, for like volunteer organizations, we've seen a change where employers maybe aren't necessarily letting you leave work to go on a call, or I think that the volunteer fire service, unfortunately, probably has seen a shift in availability, maybe not being what it was at one time.
Mhm.
So I guess that's kind of a ramble of an answer to that. But
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. So tell me about Amy. What was 16, 17, 18-year-old Amy like? And did you always know? So 20 years ago, obviously the fire service was very different than it even is today. What made you get into this? Did you always know this was something you wanted to do? And what made Amy, as obviously a female coming into the fire service, decide, hey, I know there's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of women in the fire service, but I still want to do this anyways. Take me
sure.
through your story.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think this is probably really the first time I've talked about it, but I don't think that I really ever thought like, gosh, there really aren't many other women doing this. I shouldn't do it. Um, but also at the time that I started, I think there were a couple volunteers at the department I'm with. So I was very interested in doing something in the healthcare field when I was a teenager, and I knew that being in a hospital setting wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do. I thought that it was very intriguing to kind of be out and about and on the ambulance, and that initially intrigued me. So I did some ride-alongs when I was in high school with the department that I work for now, and I just really grew to fall in love with the fire aspect of things. So started as a volunteer when I was 18, started going to school for my EMT and then my paramedic. And the department I work for is very much, we provide EMS transport. So that's kind of our bread and butter. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And then we have a staff engine as well. So I will say when I first joined, I probably saw myself more so being on the ambulance and getting to fight fire from the ambulance and occasionally being on the engine. I didn't necessarily see myself as promoting up into, company officer and then assistant chief at the time I joined because, well, for one, I was the first to be hired full time. We had other women that had worked for the department, but more so in a part-time role. And so I just didn't see anyone else that had done that and just didn't think I would get my turn, I guess.
Sure. What are some challenges that you faced in the fire service as a woman? Or even, let me rephrase that. Let's take the woman part out of it. What are some of the things that you have faced that are challenges for you? And it doesn't have to be specifically because you're a female, just
Yeah,
in general. Everybody faces problems in any career, whatever it is that you want to get into. What
for
are some
sure.
things that you specifically faced, and how did you get beyond those things?
Well, and I think that is so important to recognize. I think that, it would be easy to sit and say, because I'm a woman, X, Y, and Z. And certainly there can be those pieces, but you're right. I mean, the fire service is not easy for
Right.
anyone that gets into
Right.
it. If it is, you must have gotten a gold star department, and
Right.
congratulations.
Yeah.
I think that's huge to recognize. I will say certainly, like early on, probably confidence was a bit of an issue for me. It took some of my peers kind of recognizing and pointing out, some of my strengths and some of my leadership strengths, and that I think took me a while to overcome. I feel like that's probably more of a personal Amy piece that I had to work through.
Yeah,
Uh,
but lots of people do that. Lots of
yeah.
people have that issue. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And honestly, a lot of the times those were some of your best leaders, probably. They
Yep.
just don't recognize it.
Yep.
And then I feel like I grew up in a larger family, so the teamwork thing is never an issue for me. I really enjoy that aspect of the job. That can be for some people, I suppose. Working through the hard calls. I know when you talked with Jason recently, he kind of talked about some of the mental health aspects, and I think
Yeah.
that has changed significantly in the time that I've been in,
Okay.
which I appreciate. I think that was needed and necessary, and I I don't think that people really understand until you're doing it how much of an impact that can be. But
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question that some people might, I don't want to say get offended by. Do you think that so I just asked you the question, or what are some of the challenges that you
mm,
faced in the fire service? Do you think a lot of women in the fire service will face challenges in the fire service and then fall back on it's because I'm a woman? Do
hmm.
you think that that's used as a crutch sometimes, or do you think that that is a legitimate, not a legitimate, that it's something that is a reason for a lot of women struggling in the fire service?
I mean, I think it depends on the topic.
Okay.
I think I personally would be careful with that. I
Okay.
think there are times, certainly, like policies, for instance. If the
Sure.
department doesn't necessarily have in place a policy that addresses maternity leave or return to work and expressing milk, I think that can be a detriment, and maybe even sometimes a bit of a turnoff to someone who might be looking to get into an organization or trying to figure out how am I going to have a child, or planning out
Yeah.
of it. Um, I do think that it probably does get used sometimes by anyone in the fire service of, well, for X reason, this is why this didn't happen for me. And I think it's all about kind of reflecting a bit and, finding a good mentor and kind of working through a bit of, what really are the circumstances? What can I as a person do to persevere and push through? So, whether it's personality or gender or, I like to wear the color purple. I think there's a variety of reasons you can reach for. This didn't happen for me. But I think there also is some ownership in reaching out to resources if you're kind of coming up against a brick wall.
You mentioned policies. Do you come across a lot of policies and departments nationwide that are not helpful towards women is this a common thing? I guess
Think,
because it's not like I read a lot of policy manuals, and you're an
yeah,
assistant
no.
chief, so you
Well,
deal
that's
more on that
good.
side. Yeah. Well, right, right. So,
Lightly.
right. Oh God. Yeah. So, but
I
yeah.
mean, I think more than anything, I think it's not established policies. So
Okay.
just not having the resource in general. And in my own organization, there really wasn't anything in place when I had my children and wanted to come back and then, be able to express milk while I was on shift. And there wasn't anything in place. And it's not necessarily because they don't support me; they just hadn't thought about it. And so I think that is kind of the approach sometimes, or just the fallback a little bit sometimes of just, well, we hadn't been there before and we hadn't thought about it and
Sure.
didn't have it in place. There are a lot of organizations that have great policies out, and there's a research group that we're working with who's kind of helping to collect some of the best policies together, because we are contacted pretty regularly by departments that are looking to try to get something in place. So unfortunately, it's hard because some departments are large and they have the resources to be able to accommodate certain things, and then other smaller organizations kind of have to get a bit more creative with what those resources look like.
Yeah. Do you get any pushback from departments or individuals within a department when you come in and say, "Hey, you've obviously never had to deal with this before. You should be doing A, B, and C according to X, Y, and Z guidelines." Do you get pushback?
It's interesting. We don't necessarily take the approach of going into a department and saying you need to do this. It's more so they'll reach out to us, and it usually is the leadership or administration of an organization. Occasionally, we'll have a woman who's going through the situation reach out, and we'll just give them the information, and then they kind of take on the interaction from there, I guess. So I haven't heard a ton of pushback. I know, obviously there are certain things. If an employee brings something forward to their leadership within their organization, it can be a give and take. And so sometimes there are those interactions for that person, but not necessarily as an organization.
Okay. You mentioned that you have children. And this is actually a question I get a lot from young women that are interested in getting into the fire service. They'll send me questions, not asking me what it's like to have a child in the fire service, but is there anybody that can speak to what that's like, what that experience is like? Can you talk a little bit about the experience of A, being pregnant as a firefighter? Obviously, it's a very tough job, and there's certain things you want to watch out for when you're pregnant. But B, having little kids and what that's like, obviously, between the schedule and the difficulty of the job. I've also gotten questions from people about are there any specific health concerns for females in the fire service? Obviously, we all know that cancer rates are higher amongst firefighters. Are there things that you're worried? So I guess take me through all of it, but then end it with, are there things that you're specifically worried about as a pregnant woman or a woman that has little children that men might not necessarily be worried about?
Yeah, so we actually currently are involved in a grant project that is partially meant to come up with best practice recommendations for a woman and her OB/GYN. So it's kind of a one-page infographic that shows you, like, here's all the things that I do as a firefighter. Let's make some decisions on what my path looks like through my pregnancy. And there really hasn't been anything out like that before. And I'm very excited to be able to put something like that out, because I think it does help to answer some of those questions. It's not easy to be pregnant and to be a firefighter, but it also is very achievable. And I think that a lot of women have gone through it in a very healthy manner and been able to still perform to some level. And that looks different in every department. So the department I work for at the time that I went through my pregnancy did not have a light duty policy that allowed me to be fully off the line. So essentially, if I went to light duty, I was on the ambulance only. So still providing patient transport and lifting and all that jazz. They've since changed that and now allow for you to basically go into kind of a light duty office setting and do some project work essentially, or do fire inspections. So a lot of departments will take that approach if resources allow, but it really varies. We are still kind of working through research as far as what it looks like, what are we exposed to, because it's not just there is a concern about heat early on in your pregnancy, but also the potential for hazardous materials and toxins, and what does that look like? And so we're working with a group, with Dr. Sarah Jonke's group, to kind of come up with basically a list of all the things we need to be concerned about as far as a woman going through her pregnancy. There also is some research being done right now about reproductive health, both for men and women. That's probably a couple years out from being wrapped up, but some good topics that are being approached right now and being considered. As far as one of the dangers for coming back from pregnancy, there is research that shows that you should kind of essentially pump and dump
Yeah.
within 3 days of having been at a fire. So,
Really?
yeah, so
Okay.
that's something for women to consider that can have a big impact on, what does it look like to continue doing that if you
Right.
not all of us work for a department where you have fires all the time. If you did, it might be a little different of kind of making some of those choices. So
Okay. No, that's interesting. So I've obviously never heard that before because obviously that's not
it's
something I look
just
into. Yeah.
pretty recent within the last year-ish, I think. So
Okay. And then when we're done with this, can you send me the link to that infographic? I'll
yep.
put a link to it down in the
Oh,
description of this.
sure. So we actually are releasing it at our conference in Spokane, but I'm happy to share it with you within a few weeks.
No, that's fine. Yeah, whenever you do it, and then I'll make sure I add it to the video. So if somebody's watching this in the future, just look down below.
Yeah.
If not, check out Women in Fire, and you'll find it there whenever they release it at their conference.
Yep.
What advice would you give to young women? Again, let's go back to that idea of 18-year-old Amy. What advice would you give either yourself as an 18-year-old or the 20-year-old or 25-year-old looking to get into fire who is a little nervous, a little on the fence? I actually met a girl on an airplane actually, I was flying back from Oregon of all places,
Oh, nice.
who mentioned that she was looking to get into the fire service, but was very nervous about trying her hand at it. What advice would you give to women that are in that position?
I would say find someone to connect to, whether it's someone within the department or outside of the department, male or female. You find a good mentor and someone that kind of can help you to answer some of those odd questions we have. It is a very paramilitary organization, and I think some of our newer people coming in don't always understand what that means. I certainly had never been in anything like that prior to getting in. So I think just kind of learning some of the culture and kind of the way that you interact, but also being confident in being able to be yourself. I think it's very important that an organization is made up of a variety of people. And it's sad when sometimes, kind of personalities get stifled or people don't feel like they can be themselves within the organization. Physical fitness is a big one. I think, kind of setting up a good routine. There are some great resources out there for preparing for the CPAT or just preparing, both fitness wise and nutrition wise for being a firefighter. And I think that's very important early on to understand exactly what the demands of your body will be and also preparing your body for being able to accomplish it.
What about giving them advice to fit in on their first day? Obviously, being the new person anywhere, regardless of where you are, being the rookie, being the boot, whatever, probie, whatever you want to call it, is tough and it's awkward and it's not fun for anybody. But what specifically would you tell? Maybe there's a young girl who just got hired on somewhere and she's one of only one or two women on the entire department. Would you give them any specific advice of, hey, here's how you should be acting in order to fit in on your career? Here's some solid advice from an assistant chief.
Yeah. I mean, I think just listening, observing, learning, there is an appropriate time to ask questions. And I think knowing when you need to ask questions, if you don't know about something, kind of something we say in our organization is please ask. If you don't know something, if you don't feel comfortable asking in front of the group, ask the instructor afterwards or follow up with your trainer. Make sure that you're clarifying and learning. I would say study hard. I think sometimes that can get missed a bit. And unfortunately, like early on, you're going to have to put in time even on your days off. But I would say as far as first day goes, just kind of listening, observing, absorbing as much as possible, and know that you probably will have to ask about something a couple times extra because there's a lot. We tend to throw a lot at people early on in their careers. So
yeah,
patience and confidence, but
Sure. So what's next for Women in Fire? You mentioned that you have a conference coming up. What's next for Amy? What are your plans? How can people get a hold of you? Tell me what's coming up next for you.
Yeah, so as far as Women in Fire goes, we're very excited. We've got a conference coming in Spokane here at the end of September. Beyond that, we are co locating again with FDIC in April, and we'll be having another conference next year to be announced here pretty quick. We tend to have our international conferences every other year. With COVID, that kind of changed a little bit.
Right.
But very excited to at least have a one-day leadership conference annually at FDIC, at least for the time being. It's a good chance to get together with everyone and then also to be able to network with other leaders throughout the fire service. I think that we'll continue to evaluate research needs and data needs. There needs to be an update to the national report card and showing, you know, how many women are in the fire service, how many women are in leadership in the fire service, and just identifying out some of the information that we don't really have great numbers for. Um, for me, I'm working to finish up my bachelor's degree and hoping to start looking at an EFO program here in the next couple of years and just kind of keep going towards my higher education. That's something that I would definitely encourage of anyone that's looking to get into the fire service. Eventually, hopefully, there will be a fire chief's position in my future.
So Chief Hannafin is what you're working on, not just Assistant Chief Hannafin.
Eventually, that's the plan. So
And
we'll work at it.
so you touched on something about education, and I've talked to many people about this.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of education, this is interesting, would you recommend to people looking to get into the fire service? Obviously, if you're at a department where they do EMS, I highly recommend to everybody to go get your medic certification.
Yeah.
But do you think it helps firefighters, and I'm talking line firefighters, not executive officer
I
positions,
get it.
to get higher education? If so, what specifics in higher education? I have my own opinions on this, and I tell people about this. I get this question constantly, but what do you think?
I think it's interesting. I went to school and got my degree towards my paramedic. So in the state of Oregon, you have to have your associate's degree to, it's in a related field. So it could be EMS or fire to get your state license. And so that was the path I took. I didn't necessarily go for an associate's in fire science at the time. It was fairly popular, though not necessary to get a job. So I would say if you're just looking to get into the field, maybe it's not necessary. Though if you're maybe not inclined to know a lot about the fire service, it could probably be helpful, just to kind of get an idea of what you're getting into. I do think that those who are on the line should start kind of thinking towards what it looks like. If they're planning to stay on the line, maybe that's one thing. But if you are looking to start promoting, I think it's important to start looking at, my degree is in fire administration. And I certainly appreciate not only having had some experience prior to getting into the degree program. I think that's helped it quite a bit, but also kind of getting to expand my perspective a bit within some more like global type issues. So I do think, kind of captain level, you should be considering what it looks like. Am I planning to move up from there? And then, even if it was an associate's in fire science, at least it's a little something. But honestly, I probably would just say, go for the bachelor's degree.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, Amy, thank you for your time, and thank you for what you're doing with Women in Fire. I know there are a lot of women that watch my channel, and I know there's a lot of women out there that are interested in getting into the fire service, have no idea where to start, have no idea what resources are out there for them to help them, to support them. So thank you for the work that you're doing with them, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity again, and hopefully we can balance out your viewer pool a little bit and have a few more women engage. But no, I definitely appreciate it. I think the one thing I do appreciate about Women in Fire, it's a very inclusive group. We have males and females that are members, and so I am happy to be able to talk with you a little bit. And hopefully your audience takes it that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Amy.
Thank you.